guys, and welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today I'm doing my top 17 books of 2017. So I'm going to kind of do this a different way, and I'm going to break things down into categories, and that's kind of how I picked my best 17 books. I have more books in certain categories just because I read them more, or just because there were more, 5 or 4 star books in that category versus another category. So we're going to start off with the first category, and that would be fantasy. Now, I really did not read like that much fantasy, and I especially didn't read that much like mind-blowing, amazing fantasy, but I do have a few books here that I want to share. I have 5 in total. It's one of my larger categories. The first book that I want to talk about is Red Queen. This is the lovely new special edition that came out in preparation for the end of the series. It's like super pretty. This is one of the first fantasy books that I had read in a very long time, so keep that in mind when I'm talking about my opinions. I haven't been reading a lot of fantasy over the years. I did much more reading this year than I have done in the past, and for me this one was great. It just jump-started me. There was a great twist in the end. I totally got into it. I even listened to like soundtracks that went along with it. Part of that was because it was the first fantasy series I had read in a while. I'm going to reread it again here soon because the last book's coming out, and then I can kind of get a better feel as to the quality of the book versus just the fact that I was just so excited to be reading a fantasy book. I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a really nice read, and I am definitely excited for book 4. For those of you that are not familiar, Red Queen is technically a dystopian book. It is set in America in a kind of dystopian future where we're separated by blood. We've kind of like mutated or morphed where some of us have red blood and we're just like the straight up normal humans, and then some of us have silver blood, and the silver bloods have special powers and things that make them like more important in the eyes of the newfound government. They kind of rise to power and kind of become in control of everybody. They sort of become gods. And I don't want to give away too much. This one I kind of was glad that I didn't know a lot going into it, but there's a girl in here and she is a red blood, and she kind of comes face to face with the silver bloods, and really cool, awesome things happen. It's got some X-Men vibes. It's got a little bit of dystopian vibes. It's got queens and kings, so it's definitely much more of a fantasy in my opinion. But if you're into like kings and queens and special powers and things like that, then definitely check out Red Queen. Next up on my fantasy list is The Water Mirror by Kai Myers. This is a middle grade fantasy set in like a version of Venice where it is rich with magic and cool things, and the 2 girls in the story are orphans, and they are sent to live with they are sent to basically apprentice and live with a mirror maker, and his mirrors are magical, and they do certain magical qualities. I don't want to give too much away. And his biggest competition is the like dressmaker or the gown maker that lives across the way in the canal, and he has more boys and this guy has more girls. And there are like magical stone lions that the policemen ride around. There are mermaids that we've basically like turned captive, and they like pull our boats and they sing songs. There is a special like water god that everyone prays to. There's stuff that like comes out of hell, and like these 2 orphans, like one of them's blind but she can see things in a different way, and it was just so great. And I read it and I just loved it. I got the essence of Harry Potter as far as like just being magical and like different fantasy things that were coming to life that were just so cool. But it's not really like Harry Potter at all, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm really excited to read the next one. So check out The Water Mirror. Next up on my fantasy list is Dark Shimmer. This is by Donna Jo Napoli. I picked this one up purely because I liked the cover and I liked the description on the back. And this was like around the fall and I wanted like a creepier read. This is definitely like a dark kind of like gothic tale, but not exactly what I was expecting. It's actually a retelling, and I'm not going to tell you what it's a retelling of because that kind of gives it away, and I was shocked when I was reading it to figure it out on my own. It is just, it's one of those books that's better left with not a lot said about it, but there's basically a girl. She lives with a bunch of people and she thinks she is a monster because of how she looks and how she's different from everybody. And it's set also in like a version of Venice, and she also works with mirrors and learns how to make mirrors, and that's really awesome too. I just don't want to give anything away. It is so good though. If you like dark tales about, it's just like dark and mysterious and captivating. I believe this is set like in the early 1900s, something like that, but definitely check out Dark Shimmer. Okay, next up I want to talk about two books that I do not own yet. The first book is Atlantia. I read this earlier on in the year. It is by Ali Condi. I'll try and put a little picture here if I remember to do so. It is absolutely awesome. I thought it was a mermaid book when I went into it, but it's not really a mermaid book. They have sirens, but they're not really like mermaids with tails and stuff. It's kind of dystopian a little bit. It's in the future where the earth has gotten so bad that we've like developed this like underwater world that half of us live in, and then some people stay up to kind of maintain everything underneath. Like certain people's siblings and things will sacrifice themselves to live up top to help maintain the underneath, which is very much more like a utopian type society. It is so magical. The world building is so good. I loved the world building. Our lead character is trying to find out different things about the world and murder, and someone gets chosen to go up top that doesn't want to go up top, and just all kinds of like a little bit of political intrigue that goes into it. It's a one book story, so you don't have to read like a whole series. It made me fall back in love with Ali Condi. It made me read Matched again, even though I wasn't into Matched as much the first time. I absolutely love it. It's one of my new, like, probably favorite all-time books. It has a really beautiful cover as well. So definitely check out Atlantia. And last up on my fantasy series, favorite fantasy series, is 3 Dark Crowns and 1 Dark Throne by Kendara Blake. Again, I don't own it yet. This is a fantasy story, which I'm sure you've heard of. This is one of the newer books that I read this year about 3 sisters. They're all princesses and they all have to basically fight to the death for the crown. In my head, I had an image of this story and it didn't turn out what I thought it was, but it turned out even better. I listened to an audiobook. The audiobook is awesome. For those of you that thought it was a little slow on audiobook, it's not slow at all, and there's just so much detail in the world. There are poisoners, and their talent is they can consume large amounts of poison, and they're clever and tricky at giving poison to people and like killing people, and all that's like super interesting. There are the naturalists, and they're just good with like the environment and like animals and like all that kind of thing. And then I don't know if I can remember the third one, but that one's awesome too. I loved all of the queens in the tale, or the princesses, or whatever you want to call them. I'm very into like royalty themed things, as you'll see in the rest of the video, but I absolutely loved both of them so much. They were 5 stars for me. I'm so excited for when book 3 comes out. I think it's going to be the finale, but definitely check out 3 Dark Crowns if you like fantasy and girl power and like all kinds of awesome things. Okay, next up on my list is dystopian. I read about 20 dystopian books this year. I'm really behind on my dystopian literature, so I'm catching up on some old series and things like that. Most of these were series dystopian books. I have 3 dystopian books to share with you. 2 of them are part of a series. First up is the Selection series. This is book 4 in the series, which is kind of like a companion book, but it doesn't matter. I like all 5 of these books. These were this was the first series that I read of the year, and that got me like really back into reading and booktube and like all that kind of stuff. I literally drove to like 6 different libraries to get these books like fast. I read some of them in like a day. I was just so into it. It's basically, this is dystopian, but I personally consider it more of a romance / fantasy. It is about a dystopian society in America, obviously, where there is a king and queen again, and they pick the next queen by having a selection for the lower and middle classes, and they pick different girls from them to compete in a competition for the prince's heart. It's like The Bachelor, basically, and it doesn't really have a lot of like battles and political intrigue and all that kind of stuff. It just is really heavy on the romance, but the romance is really good. And it's just one of those books that's like, it's not that it's like the best book ever written or anything like that. It's just like so good. You just can't stop reading it because it's fun. It's fun and it's interesting and you just enjoy it. It is a 5-book series that you could totally get away with reading the first 3 books and that's it if you don't want to commit to a long series, although they do read very quickly and there are some novellas that go with it as well that are also really good. Do not read the back of the 4th and the 5th book if you are interested in reading until you're about ready to read them because it will give some things away, but I really enjoyed the selection by Kira Cass. Next up is Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi, and I am praying that this year we'll get a new hardcover edition of this book. I liked the entire series. This is dystopian, but again, it is kind of more fantasy, kind of more romance. So it is about a girl who basically if you touch her, you die. Like people die when they touch her and nobody knows why. So she winds up getting like locked away and she is in basically kind of like a prison slash insane asylum type thing for the beginning of this book. She's in isolation for a really long time. And I'm gonna put this down because it's too shiny. And it's really good. I don't want to tell you too much else. There are like special powers in this. Again, we've got kind of an X-Men vibe to a little extent. There's not a lot of action though, especially in the first book. There's some controversial things that happen, but it's got really interesting romance to read about, like cheesy, fun, good romance. The writing is very different and lyrical. It starts out with her writing in her diary and then she crosses things out that she's thinking that she doesn't like, and it's just very different. You'll either love or hate this book. I've noticed that. Most of the people I know really like it, but I understand why a lot of people don't really like it. I am excited for the continuation of the series that's coming out in a couple of months. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about Shatter Me. And the last book I have to recommend is more of a dystopian series like True and True. I read a lot of other True and True dystopian series, but I didn't enjoy them as much as I did these 3. So that one, again, I don't own. I will hopefully in the future, is Hungry by H.A. Swain. Now this is a futuristic dystopian society where we no longer consume food. The government is in control of everything, and we just have these like simulated drinks that we do for nutrients, and it's just got exactly what you need and that's it, and you adjust it like based on your growth or hormone levels or whatever, but you don't ever actually eat food. Our main character I think is Thalia Apple, I'm pretty sure. She is basically on a quest to find out why people used to eat food and why they thought it was interesting. She winds up running into some interesting smells, and it sounds really cheesy, and it kind of is, as most dystopians are, but it was just really well written. It's very fast paced. It's like a wild adventure. It's a 1-book dystopian, which is hard to find. It wraps up nicely. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed certain aspects of the world building, and yeah, I really liked it. I liked it so much that I got H.A.'s next book gifted, and I don't know what that one's about, but I'm really excited to read that one as well. All right, my next category is contemporary. I read quite a bit of contemporary. I'm not sure my numbers, maybe like 13 or 14. I have 4 books to share with you from that. Okay, so the first book I listened to on audiobook, and that is Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. This is typically not my kind of contemporary book. It's basically about kind of like a Groundhog Day, like a darker Groundhog Day. You find this out in the beginning, but this girl basically dies and she has to relive the day that she dies over and over and over again, and she's trying to figure out whether she needs to change something to stop it from happening and save her and her friends, or whether it's just a loop that's going to last forever and all that kind of stuff. It does get repetitive at times. I think the audiobook really helped with that. I really liked the person that read the audiobook, and I can't remember her name right now. I liked it. This is controversial for different reasons. I understand why, but I liked it. I almost cried at the end. It almost got me. I thought the end was wrapped up very nicely and kind of had a good moral to it, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a pretty decently sized book too. And it made me want to read more Lauren Oliver books because the writing is very well done. And she basically in the beginning is writing about an unlikable character because our character is like popular and kind of inconsiderate and kind of rude and selfish. And she kind of learns things on her journey. So there you have it, Before I Fall by Lauren Oliver. Then I have the To All of the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han. I was really mad when I found out about this series because I had an idea a few years ago that was kind of similar to it, but Jenny Han did a fabulous job writing this book series. It is about an Asian American family, which is so interesting to read about. It's about Laura Jean, and she has these different crushes, and when she gets over them, she writes them these breakup letters, and she never sends them. Well, basically they get sent out, and she kind of has to deal with the consequences of that. I loved the romance in these. I love that Laura Jean was like super innocent and really cute and liked to bake, and she loved her sisters, and her dad was awesome, and everything in this was just like family oriented, and I loved that kind of relationship part of it. I liked all 3 books. I read them over a weekend while I was vacationing. It was one of those books that just like made you happy, even though it had some drama and things in it. I just was like smiling while I was reading it and telling my husband the cute little things that like guys would do for her. And I just really enjoyed it. It was a really good contemporary read for me personally. So check out To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. Then I have Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I knew I was either going to love or dislike this one. I'm very particular on my contemporary, but I wound up really loving this. This is about, as I'm sure you know, this is about Kath in her first year of college. She's kind of a recluse and she's kind of an introvert, and she winds up making some new friends and going through all the things that happen in college. She writes a very popular fan fiction blog about Simon Snow, which is basically like a twist on Harry Potter, and she is really into it, and she's really popular, so she feels like obligated to like post every week, and so she's kind of doing that in school, but it's kind of making her antisocial. You get little blurbs from Simon Snow and his adventures in here, which I really liked. The love interest in here is really sweet, and I just thought, again, this book made me smile. It was very sweet. It had like, you know, some good sister moments, and I really like Rainbow Rowell's writing style, so I'm excited to read more from her. But yeah, that's Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. And the last contemporary that was on my list that was like my 5-star read of the year, again, was almost my favorite book of the year, and I don't own it, is Sourdough by Robin Sloan. Now this contemporary is really interesting because there are these almost sci-fi aspects to it, but it is contemporary. I would consider it contemporary, at least through and through. And it is about a young girl, I think she's like 19 or 20, and she moves to San Francisco to use her mechanical engineering degree, and basically she works on robotic arms for fun. And one day a menu gets slipped under her door for like this little, she thinks it's like a little restaurant, but it's actually done out of someone's home, of these guys that make faux like Asian soups and sourdough bread, and so she orders from them and she completely becomes addicted to it, and she winds up getting a sourdough starter, which is it's a form of yeast and bacteria made with flour, and I know that sounds gross, but that's how you make sourdough bread that's fermented. I am really into fermentation. I have my own sourdough bread that I make. I make kombucha and kefir and all kinds of fun things. That's kind of a side job that I also do. I work for the website culturedfoodlife.com, so I'm really into bacteria and gut health and like all that kind of stuff. But even if you're not into any of that or have never even heard of that, or I'm completely confused about what I'm talking about right now, you should read Sourdough. It is so interesting, and if you have never wanted to make bread in your life, this book is going to want to make you make bread. I already make bread, and it made me feel like I'd never made bread before. And it has all these cool, like, almost magical things that happen in this weird farmer's market with all this weird food, and it's just such a well-written book. It has become beloved in my heart. I was so happy when reading it. I was so interested I haven't had a contemporary book suck me in where I'm like, wait, what's happening? What's gonna happen? That much as I did with Sourdough. It's one of my all-time favorite books now. I'm so glad that I read it. And it's an adult book, but it's completely appropriate for young adults as well. Definitely check out Sourdough by Robin Sloan. Okay, next up I'm gonna talk about some sci-fi books. I really didn't read very many sci-fi books this year, but the ones that I did read, I loved. So we're going to talk about those. The first sci-fi book I read this year was Earth Girl, and I read all three in the series. There's Earth Girl, Earth Star, and Earth Flight. This is by Janet Edwards. I have heard absolutely no one talk about these books, and I do not know why. It is one of my absolute new favorite series. I picked it up randomly because I thought the picture was cool. I also thought it was dystopian, but it's definitely more of a sci-fi book. This is set in 2788. Way in the future when we got things going on. We have figured out how to travel to different planets and how to have life there and how to support life there, but there are a small group of people, that small relative to the world, that cannot travel because they have basically a allergic reaction, which causes them to die while traveling, which makes people consider them to be apes and not as evolved as the rest of humanity. So that's their horrible nickname that they give them. Jara is one of these apes, and it's about her story and her life. This is basically told like she is writing a book to you, the future generation, about her wonderful journeys and things that have happened to her that are awesome. So she actually is part of a dig team where they wear these awesome suits and they go out across America in different sites and they dig up rubble from things that have kind of just fallen apart across the years from it being abandoned, from us going to other planets. So she digs through to find artifacts from nowadays of time capsules and things, and all these cool things happen. The technology is so cool, the world is so cool. It's dramatic, but not super dramatic. It is just the kind of book where you're like, oh no, she's gonna die, something horrible is gonna happen, and then you're like, oh my god, this is a lovely story. I absolutely loved it. The romance is so sweet, and something that happens in book 2 almost made me cry, and I am so upset that this is not talked about more on book 2 because it is one of my absolute all-time favorite series now, and I'm going to be bragging about it a lot more in the future. So check out Earth Girl by Janet Edwards. Then we have A Wrinkle in Time series. I only read A Wrinkle in Time and A Wind in the Door, or reread them I should say, in 2017, and I listened to them on audiobook. They were just as great as I remember being before. I absolutely loved them. They are way ahead of their time. They just are enlightening and smart, and they make you want to learn about science and I don't know, just all kinds of cool things. I don't want to give away too much, but they are just, you travel to different dimensions and different worlds and you learn things, and it's about these kids and their awesome family and their smart parents, and it's a classic, so you should definitely go read A Wrinkle in Time. And the last book on my best of sci-fi list is Armada. Armada was the last audiobook I listened to in 2017, and I loved it. Armada is by Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One, which I'm currently listening to. I decided to read Armada first, or listen to it first before Ready Player One, even though they don't go together, just because it was brand new, and also because I was wanting to get it for my brother for Christmas, and I wanted to make sure it was something that he would like because he loved Ready Player One. So I listened to it partially in November, partially in December, and I loved it. Armada is about a young kid. It's kind of similar to Ready Player One, honestly, but it's about a young boy who's obsessed with video games, and there's this video game that's called Armada that he plays and he's really good at, and it's set in the future and some things happen. It's just very sci-fi. There's aliens. I just don't want to give a lot away because it's kind of fun to just discover it and go on the journey. But if you like sci-fi books, or if you like video games and really nerdy stuff, if you like that vibe from Ready Player One, that's very nostalgic because they talk about a lot of science fiction movies and shows, and even some 80s and 90s music and things like that. It has all of that goodness in there. I really recommend listening to the audiobook by Will Wheaton. both Ready Player One and Armada are fabulous on audiobook, read by him. He does an amazing job. So that was my last favorite sci-fi book of the year. And the last list that I created, I decided to make like a scary slash horror, aka Halloween type books, because I read a lot of these in this year and I have a couple of favorites. I just have 2 favorites with me, and some of these were particularly awesome. I'm a big scaredy cat, so I don't like to read a lot of books that are like terrifying or like crazy gory, but it seemed to me I might be less scared of them in book form versus movie form. The first book on my list is The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Black. This book has made me a Holly Black fangirl. I haven't read anything else by Holly Black, but now I just know that I'm gonna love her other books. I can just feel it. This one I believe is set in modern times, but something has happened, and it's kind of a cross between like basically how the zombie disease would spread. It is vampirism. So you can get bit by a vampire and you have this horrible time where you go through this change, and then you either die or you drink blood and you become a vampire. So because of that, we've created this almost dystopian society where they have sectioned off parts of America and designated them cold towns, and that is where basically they try to keep the people that are infected or that are vampires. They try to kind of keep them in those areas, and they pay bounty hunters money to find vampires and put them in Cold Town because they're trying to designate it and keep it like contained. But you can also like pay to go to Cold Town if you're just like basically a fangirl for vampires, and there's like these like rest stops that have all these weird fangirl like vampire like I got bitten in Cold Town and stuff like that shirts that you can go and you can be a part of Cold Town, but it's very dark and dangerous and creepy and scary. And this book is super gory, and it starts out really intense, and it scared the crap out of me, and I had to read with the lights on, but I still really liked it. And just the whole world building of this was so interesting, but it is quite gory. For me, at least, it was quite gory, and I am a huge baby. Until this book, the scariest book I had read was Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. So kind of keep that in mind with like the scariness level, because it is still a young adult book. I think she's eventually going to write a second one, but I'd be really interested in that. I just really enjoyed it. I feel like even if you didn't enjoy vampire books, that you would still like this. But if you like vampire books, then you're going to absolutely love this book. So this is one of my new cult favorites, especially for Halloween, because it's so dark and it's just I love it. Okay, and the very last book on my best books of 2017, and another one of my like scary, creepy reads, gothic reads, is A Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. I listened to this one also on audiobook, and it was fabulous. It has 3 books in the series. The second book is pretty good. The third book is close to as good as this, but not quite. This one is just so much better than the other 2. They're all based on different things, but this one basically is a retelling sort of the Isle of Dr. Moreau. It's about his daughter and her like growing up and being without him, and then finding out that he is alive and finding him and all of his experiments and things like that. If you don't know about Dr. Moreau, I've never read it, but it's basically about like a kind of a madman that puts like bits of like humans and animals together and makes these like creatures and inventions, and it is so creepy. This is very dark, very gothic. It has some like romance to it though, and a lot of story. It's not just like gore and gross and all that stuff the whole time, and it's very, very story driven. The audiobook was just so amazing. It's just really, really good. I was listening to this and literally like so many times I was getting like creeped out, and I was like looking around for like things to like like weird animals and stuff. And then at the very end, when the end happened, I was just so blown away with the ending that I was on a walk and I literally just stopped, and I like was standing there with my mouth open like, holy crap, what do I do now? I had to tell my husband the entire synopsis of this book because I loved it that much. I spent like 2 hours explaining the entire story to him because I was that big of a fan. It's might be my favorite book of 2017. However, it does have a lot of talking about vivisection, which is like surgery on people or animals while they're awake. So that's like really creepy. If you're super, super sensitive to that, you might want to steer away from this. But personally, like I said, I'm kind of a big baby and I could handle it because it wasn't like, I feel like it didn't go overboard and it was like just enough to creep you out, but not enough to like make you want to go like throw up or like pass out or anything. This one also scared me though, especially listening to it at night alone in my bed. But it was awesome for Halloween and I absolutely loved it. And I'm excited to read Megan Shepherd's other stories now. Again, just like Holly Black, because I love this. So definitely check out The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. Okay, you guys, those are my top 17 books. I hope it was 17 books for 2017. Those are all of my absolute favorites of faves. So let me know below what your guys' favorite books of 2017 are and what you're really looking forward to in 2018. And I will see you guys next time on the bright side. Bye!